So just let me know.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Down syndrome people generally don't live a long lifetime. The cousin, I think, lived to be 55, something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
So maybe there'll be some respite at the end yet.
But you will read today the World Herald obits, right?
Yeah.
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 Okay.
And you want to read from that stack over there? Or
Yeah.
What would you
I think I'm going to read from the stack.
It cuts down your, since I've talked so much, it cuts down.
Yeah.
Or you want to read half of mine?
Obits?
Yeah.
Oh no.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll get the link.
Nobody will know the difference.
Yeah.
Channel 7.2 and 123, channel 19, channel 36, appearances, channel 42 and 42 episodes of Two Little Girls, 11 o'clock, channel 3.2 and 125, 2 episodes of Sex Days, channel 6.3, 2 episodes of Barney Miller, channel 15 and 11, 2 episodes of Hot Cleveland, channel 26 and 12, Potato Chip, channel 36, 2 Play, at 11:30. Channel 3 and 5 is a first series of recording. Channel 6 and 8, that's Miami. Channel 75, ABC Nightline. Channel 7.2 and 123, The Twilight Zone. Channels 26 and 12, Believe the World Show. Channel 42 and 10, Fight the Home. At midnight. Channel 3.2 and 125, Freaky Friday. Channel 6.3, 2 episodes of New Heart. Channel 7 and 9, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Channel 7.2 and 123, The Job Search. Rockford Files. Channels 16 and 11, 2 episodes of Spy Film. Channels 26 and 12, 2 episodes of Ask This Old House. Channel 36, Luther. Channels 42 and 10, 2 episodes of Cops Reloaded. At 12:30, Channels 3 and 5, Entertainment Tonight. Channels 6 and 8, Crazy Daily. Channels 7 and 9, Just Relax. And that is your TV Gunner Things for Thursday, April 14, 2016.
Each year, the National Federation of the Blind awards 30 scholarships ranging from $3,000 to $12,000 to recognize achievement by blind scholars. Applicants must be legally blind, pursuing or planning to pursue a full-time post-secondary course of study, and participate in all scheduled scholarship program activities. NFB scholarships are awarded on the basis of academic excellence, community service, and financial need. You don't need to be a member of the NFB to qualify. The deadline for applications is March 31st each year. Applications may be completed online at www.nfb.org/scholarships. Applicants requiring the application materials and other formats or wishing to ask questions may email scholarships@nfb.org. That's scholarships@nfb.org.
All right. That brings us right up to that 6 o'clock hour, and that means the live reading for this lovely Thursday evening. It's such a beautiful day. We have Bill Hesselink and Sherry Laughlin are both in there and ready and ready to go to get started on your live reading for you. So I'm going to hand it on over to the gentleman, and they're going to get right on started with it for you.
Thank you, Elaine. Good evening, Dateline, Washington. Russian attack planes buzzed a U.S. Navy destroyer in the Baltic Sea multiple times Monday and Tuesday, coming as close as an estimated 30 feet from the ship and twice passing below the ship's navigation bridge, U.S. officials said Wednesday. The Russian Su-24 planes appeared unarmed, but on Tuesday flew what the commander of the USS Donald Cook deemed to be a simulated attack profile. The Cook's commander judged the actions unsafe and unprofessional, but the ship took no action beyond trying unsuccessfully to communicate with the aircraft by radio, according to a statement by U.S. European Command. The U.S. European Command, which oversees U.S. military operations in that area, said the Cook was conducting deck landing drills with an Allied military helicopter when two Super-24s made numerous close-range and low-altitude passes Monday afternoon. One pass occurred when the helicopter was refueling on the Cook's deck. As a safety precaution, flight operations were suspended until the Su-24s departed the area, it said. European Command did not identify the ally involved, but other officials said the helicopter was Polish. It was unclear when or if the U.S. government would formally protest the Russian actions, which comes at a time of tensions between Washington and Moscow over Russia's annexation of Crimea, its military intervention in eastern Ukraine, and fears among former Soviet states in Eastern Europe that Russian aggression could threaten their independence. White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest said the incident was part of a pattern of unsafe Russian aircraft action. The incident is entirely inconsistent with the professional norms of militaries operating in proximity to each other in international waters and international airspace, Ernst said. There have been repeated incidents over the last year where the Russian military, including Russian military aircraft, have come close enough to each other or have come close enough to other air and sea traffic to raise serious safety concerns. We continue to be concerned about this behavior, he said. Dateline Berlin. Computers may have us all beat at chess and checkers, but new research suggests our brains still have an edge when it comes to solving certain tricky problems, thanks to a very human trait, intuition. Scientists in Denmark have found that people who played a game that simulated a complex calculation in physics sometimes did better than their silicone rivals. The big surprise we had was that some of the players actually had solutions that were of high quality and of shorter duration than any computer algorithms could find, said Jacob Fritz Shearson, a physicist at Aarhus University who co-wrote the study, published Wednesday in the journal Nature. Experts say the results could advance the quest to develop effective quantum computers, something most major universities and several tech companies are working on as they seek to accelerate processing power. Such computers use the individual atoms to store information, and it's hoped they could one day outperform even the fastest conventional silicon-based supercomputers. The problem that Shearson and his colleagues set out to tackle concerns the best way to control the atoms using laser beams before their quantum state is disturbed. Time is limited and the number of possibilities is vast, meaning that even advanced computers struggle to find the perfect solution. The scientists decided to create a game called Quantum Moves, in which players had to perform essentially the same task by using their mouse to simulate the laser beams that pick up the atoms and move them around. This approach, known as gamification, has been used for several years to solve other scientific problems, such as identifying types of galaxies based on their shape. Most of the other efforts deal with pattern recognition, whereas our game is very dynamic and intuition-based, said Shearson. The team found that players were able to perform computers precisely because they didn't try all possible options one by one. One of the most distinctly human abilities is our ability to forget and filter out information, he said. And that's very important here because we have a problem that's just so complicated, you will never be finished if you attack it systematically. Frank Wilhelm Mach, a professor of theoretical physics at the University of Saarbrücken, who wasn't involved in the study, said the Danish scientists had found a way to exploit the very human intuitively finding solutions to fairly complex problems by simplifying them, thereby achieving a solution that might not be as mathematically perfect as produced by a computer, but definitely more practical. The work looks extremely solid and the solution is totally plausible, he said. Wilhelm Mach said the results of the study would likely affect the entire field of quantum computing because similar problems exist like sand on a beach. The Danish scientists are hoping to build on their existing work as word of the game and its contribution to quantum physics spreads, drawing in more players.
From the New York Times, Black victims' mothers step forward for Clinton. The Sweet Maple Cafe in Chicago, famous for its grilled cheese sandwiches and sweet milk biscuits, typically closes each day after the lunch rush. But one evening in November, the restaurant opened for an unusual private dinner. The mothers of Michael Brown, Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, and Tamir Rice, and a half dozen other Black women who had lost children in clashes with the police or in gun violence were flown in from around the country and invited to gather around the table. They were joined by Hillary Clinton, who asked them one by one to tell her their stories. She took her pad and her ink pen, she wrote her own notes, and she asked us, what did we need? said Maria Hamilton, whose son Dontre was shot 14 times by a white Milwaukee police officer in 2014. Mrs. Clinton appeared visibly hurt as the mother spoke, said Lucia McBath, whose 17-year-old son Jordan Davis was fatally shot after playing loud music in his car in 2012. The gathering, held without aides or journalists present, stretched into a nearly 3-hour dinner over pork chops and gravy, fried okra, and rice. After dessert of apple pie, Mrs. Clinton encouraged the women to organize and travel the country with her campaign. "You are the mothers of the children who are dying on the streets," Mrs. Clinton told the group. Mrs. McBath recalled, "You have a lot of power individually," she said, "but collectively, you need to come together. The country needs to hear from you." Since then, these mothers, many of whom did not know one another before the Clinton campaign flew them to Chicago to convene, have blanketed the primary states, appearing with Mrs. Clinton in churches and barbershops from Ohio to South Carolina. They starred in an ad that aired in Cleveland, Chicago, and St. Louis, and the campaign has paid their travel expenses so they could attend the Democratic presidential debates. There I was, sitting behind Donna Brazile and in front of Cornel West, said Geneva Reed Veal, the mother of Sandra Bland, who died in police custody in Texas last year after an altercation with a state trooper. Nobody knew we were there. The Clinton campaign named this sisterhood, forged in the shared loss of a child, the Mothers of the Movement, and they have become an unlikely linchpin of Mrs. Clinton's success in the Democratic primary. At campaign stops, Mrs. Clinton introduces them as a group of mothers who belong to a club no one ever wants to join. The mothers will arrive in New York this week to help Mrs. Clinton compete in the primary on Tuesday. Having these women by her side has provided Mrs. Clinton with powerful and deeply sympathetic character witnesses as she makes her case to African American voters, and they have given her campaign an often cautious and poll-tested operation, a raw, human, and sometimes gut-wrenching feeling. The presence of the mothers has also proved a shrewd political move, influencing Black leaders and lawmakers to back Mrs. Clinton. Those not supporting her are reluctant to go against her because we led the marches and the rallies on these things and have worked very closely with the mothers, said the Reverend Al Sharpton, whose National Action Network is hosting Mrs. Clinton and her opponent in the Democratic primary, Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont, for a discussion of civil rights issues at its annual conference this week in New York. It certainly influences how we related to her campaign, added Mr. Sharpton, who has not endorsed a candidate. On Wednesday, Mrs. Clinton received the biggest applause of an otherwise lukewarm reception at Mr. Sharpton's convention when she introduced Sabrina Fulton, the mother of Mr. Martin, and Gwen Kerr, the mother of Mr. Garner. Mr. Sanders has the support of Mr. Garner's daughter, Erica, the director, Spike Lee, Mr. Rest, and other prominent Black figures, and he talks frequently about being arrested in the 1960s while marching for civil rights. But the mothers have allowed Mrs. Clinton to really tap into the pulse of the Black community, said Representative Yvette D. Clark, Democrat of New York, who has endorsed Mrs. Clinton. The other candidate on the Democratic side did not reach out to us, Annette Nance Holt, whose 16-year-old son, Blair Holt, was shot on a Chicago bus in 2007, said at a campaign event last month. She explained starkly that she was not swayed by Mr. Sanders' promise of free college because my child is dead. Mrs. Clinton's outreach to the women began early, even before she officially announced she was running for president, and has continued throughout her campaign. In December, Mrs. Reed Veal, the mother of Mrs. Bland, received a Christmas card in the mail. "I know this is the first holiday without your baby." The neat cursive handwriting read, "Just know I'm thinking of you." It was signed Hillary. She received another note from Mrs. Clinton when a grand jury declined to indict anyone in her daughter's death. That kind of personal touch inspired Mrs. Reed Veal to join Mrs. Clinton's campaign. At a black church in Milwaukee last month, sitting on stage next to the candidate, she told her story and implored the city's black residents to vote for Mrs. Clinton. Drive up to the corner where that young man is standing with his pants hanging down, and if he is 18 or older, take his hand and make him vote, Mrs. Reed Veal said. Make that young man know that people died for him. Make him understand that. For many of the mothers, supporting Mrs. Clinton meant absolving her of the pain caused by policies of her husband, former President Bill Clinton, including a 1994 crime bill that built more prisons, put 100,000 additional police officers on the streets, and increased sentences for nonviolent drug offenses. Mrs. Garner, who made an ad for Mr. Sanders, said Mrs. Clinton was constantly throwing around my dad's name, but had previously called people like my dad super predators. Mrs. Clinton used the term in 1996 to describe urban gang members and has since said she regrets doing so. And last week, Mr. Clinton faced intense backlash after he drowned out the chants of Black Lives Matter protesters. She's not her husband, Mrs. Nance Holt said in an interview. She's her own woman. The mothers must also contend with critics who said that Mrs. Clinton's early and frequent outreach is a cynical ploy to woo black voters who have largely swayed the primary in her favor. People go around and say, "You're being pimped by the secretary," Mrs. Reed Veal said. "Who in the heck is going to exploit us?" Mrs. Clinton shows a different side when she's around the mothers. She talks less and seems more maternal, growing teary and turning to scripture in response to the women's pain. Let us not grow weary of doing good, because in due time we will harvest if we stay focused, she often says, paraphrasing Galatians 6, verse 9. No one can deny that Bernie Sanders has just as much sympathy and compassion, but God put us in all sorts of packages, said Representative Charles B. Rangel of New York, who is supporting Mrs. Clinton. The events at which the mothers appear unleash emotional reactions. At Tabernacle Community Baptist Church in Milwaukee last month, a woman in the congregation wailed as the other mothers told their stories. When we heard those screams, we knew, said Mrs. Nance Holt, who had driven from Chicago to campaign for Mrs. Clinton. That was the sound when your child has been murdered. After the event, the campaign brought the women backstage to meet Mrs. Clinton. The candidate listened intently to her story and then promised to follow up.
Dateline Washington. Republican presidential candidate Ted Cruz is close to ensuring that Donald Trump cannot win the GOP nomination on a second ballot at the party's July convention in Cleveland, scooping up scores of delegates who have pledged to vote for him instead of the frontrunner if given the chance. The push by Cruz means that it is more essential than ever for Trump to clinch the nomination by winning a majority of delegates to avoid a contested and drawn-out convention fight, which Trump seems almost certain to lose. The GOP race now rests on two cliffhangers. Can Trump lock up the nomination before Cleveland? If not, can Cruz cobble together enough delegates to win a second convention vote if Trump fails in the first? Trump's path to amassing the 1,237 delegates he needs to win outright has only gotten narrower after losing to Cruz in Wisconsin and other recent contests, and it would require him to perform better in the remaining states than he has up to this point. In addition, based on the delegate selections made by states and territories, Cruz is poised to pick up at least 130 more votes on a second ballot, according to a Washington Post analysis. That tally surpasses 170 delegates under less conservative assumptions, a number that could make it impossible for Trump to emerge victorious. That is why the race centers on the fevered hunt for delegates across the country. The intensity of the fight has sparked another round of caustic rhetoric, including allegations from party leaders that Trump supporters are making death threats It's unfortunate politics has reached a new low. These types of threats have no place in politics, said Kyle Babcock, a Republican delegate from Indiana's 3rd Congressional District. He received an email from a Trump supporter who warned, "Think before you take a step down the wrong path." Cruz's chances rest on exploiting a wrinkle in the GOP rulebook that delegates assigned to vote for Trump at the convention do not actually have to be Trump supporters. Cruz is particularly focused on getting loyalists elected to get delegate positions, even in states that the senator from Texas lost. On Wednesday in Indiana, for example, Republican leaders were finalizing a delegate slate that will include party activists unlikely to vote for Trump in the state's primary next month. Cruz is also poised to sweep Wyoming's 26 delegates this weekend in a state where Trump's campaign did not seriously compete. In Arkansas, Cruz supporters are exploring ways to topple Trump when delegates are chosen next month. And Senator Marco Rubio has refused to release 171 delegates he won when he was in the race, signaling that he may contribute to the anti-Trump push in Cleveland. Cruz said this week that he thinks the odds of a contested convention are very high. In Cleveland, I believe we will have an enormous advantage, he told radio talk show host Glenn Beck. Trump has a commanding lead in total delegates and the overall vote total, but he has complained that Republican leaders are conspiring against him in a bid to silence his supporters. The RNC should be ashamed of itself for allowing this to happen, Trump said Tuesday night while campaigning in Rome, New York. Paul Manafort, a senior advisor to Trump, said in an interview that he's confident Cruz will never have a chance to convert Trump delegates. Just because Cruz has won some delegates in a state where we have the delegates voting for us is not relevant until and unless there's a second ballot, Manafort said. There's not going to be a second ballot. As the battle for delegates has intensified, so too have emotions. Craig Dunn, who was elected Saturday as a Republican delegate from Indiana's 4th Congressional District, said he has received several threatening phone calls and emails after criticizing Trump in recent news reports. When they reference burials and your family in the same email and telling you that you're being watched, that's concerning, he said. In Colorado, Republicans are planning a rally Friday to call attention to threats made against GOP Chairman Steve House. He said his office has received 3,000 phone calls, with many being the trashiest you can imagine, after a state party convention last weekend awarded all 34 delegates to Cruz. Shame on the people who think somehow that it is right to threaten me and my family over not liking the outcome of an election, he wrote on Facebook. Cruz told Beck on Tuesday that threats made by Trump supporters, including those made by the businessman's longtime confidant, Roger Stone, are, quote, the tactic of union thugs. That is violence. It is oppressive, close quote. Stone recently told an interviewer that Trump supporters would track down delegates at their hotel rooms in Cleveland if they break away from Trump. Manafort said that it's certainly not part of our policy to threaten violence, but accused abusive Cruz supporters of confronting Trump's backers at party meetings nationwide. When the presidential nomination vote is held at the convention, 95% of the delegates will be bound to the results in their states for the first vote, giving Trump his best shot at securing a majority. But if Trump falls short, the convention will cast a second ballot in which more than 1,800 delegates from 31 states, nearly 60% of the total, will be unbound and allowed to vote however they want. By the third round, 80% of the delegates would be free, sparking a potential free-for-all that could continue for several more rounds. That is the crux of the state-by-state battle that is playing out over the next 2 months as Republicans gather at the precinct, county, congressional district, and statewide levels to choose convention delegates. If we go to a contested convention, we're going to have a ton of delegates. Donald is going to have a ton of delegates, and it's going to be a battle in Cleveland to see who can earn a majority of the delegates that were elected by the people. Cruz told a meeting of the Republican Jewish Coalition in Las Vegas on Saturday. He predicted that the first ballot will be the highest vote total Donald Trump receives, and on a subsequent ballot, we're going to win the nomination.
From Rome, from his front seat perch, Alberto Tomasi, a Roman cab driver for 50 years, has been both eavesdropper and confessor. He has played impromptu tour guide, thwarted muggings, and rushed countless clients to the emergency room. And he has consoled abandoned wives with a dose of homespun wisdom. I told one woman whose husband had left her for someone much younger, as we say in Rome, when one pope dies, you make another. Expertly navigating Rome's narrow, pothole streets, many conceived centuries before the internal combustion engine, he has developed the unflappable calm of a Zen monk. If you can get through the first 15 years without getting really angry, you can do it forever, Mr. Tomasi said. I just take things as they come. Only a handful of taxi drivers have managed to navigate Rome's notorious traffic, a mix of bad roads and drivers' aversions to rules that is a national characteristic for 5 decades. It's a tough job, alternating night and day shifts, dealing with the smog, the traffic, the stress, the unruly drivers, said Loreno Bittarelli, the president of Mr. Tomasi's radio taxi cooperative. And after 50 years, you don't even get a great pension, Mr. Bittarelli said. You can risk dying of hunger if you retire early. In Italy, taxi drivers contribute as self-employed workers to the national social security system, which allocates pensions based on those contributions. Mr. Bittarelli was also upset that Roman taxi drivers are often maligned as a privileged lobby that fights things like the liberalization of licenses. I don't know how many public services work as well as we do, he said. Alberto sacrificed a lot to keep working. It's humiliating that anyone would consider his work as privileged. For his part, Mr. Tomasi was disappointed that his achievement wasn't officially recognized this year. No party, no gold watch, no tribute. So he decided to place a round silver sticker emblazoned with 50 years of taxi on the rear window of his cab. Mr. Tomasi began driving on February 5, 1966, after he bought a taxi license for 5 million Italian lire. It was an awful lot of money, he said, about the same as the cost to buy a mid-sized apartment. Rome in the mid-1960s was experiencing a giddy moment. Amid the long post-war economic boom, the capital was a crossroad of starlet and celebrity chasers, cardinals and cafe society, decaying aristocracy, and growing entrepreneurship. Then as now, celebrities were fodder for the gossip-hungry public, and paparazzi budged the streets on swerving scooters, scouting nightclubs like Billalusi and the Grotta del Piccione, long since closed, for their prey. Those were the days before the selfies, Mr. Tomasi said. Unfolding a plastic bag, he gingerly lifted a faded newspaper clipping mounted in a simple frame, a personal memento from those long-gone days when Rome was known as Hollywood on the Tiber. A photo showed Mr. Tomasi as he squired the actors Ursula Andress and Jean-Paul Belmondo around Rome. I had my head full of hair, he said, laughing and looking skyward toward his thinning pate. He recalled that in that summer of 1967 or thereabouts, the two actors were very much in love. His fares included the great neo-realist director Vittorio De Sica, the bicycle thief, and the actors Ugo Tognazzi, La Cage aux Follies, and Alberto Sordi, An American in Rome. The director, Federico Fellini, had a regular route between his home near the Piazza del Popolo and Café de Paris in Via Veneto. Mr. Tomasi knew the private address of the actress Sofia Loren, and the actor Marcello Mastroianni once invited him for coffee, he said. Back then, he could wheel his Fiat 600 Multipla, the first of his 8 cabs, around the Arch of Constantine next to the Colosseum, drive straight across Tiber Island, zip around Piazza Navona, or drive straight into St. Peter's Square, areas that have since been made pedestrian-only zones. It was a time when people laughed, living the Bella Vita, he recalled fondly. They were beautiful years. One disappointment was missing, a chance to drive Pope Paul VI around the Vatican Gardens. It's probably just as well the opportunity didn't work out, he said. If I'd told people that I'd driven the Pope, they would have thought I was crazy, he said. Today, he could probably pull it off, he laughingly acknowledged Pope Francis' occasional attempts to get out and about like a normal citizen. When Mr. Tomasi began driving, the city extended only a few tendrils toward the ring road that encircles it. Today, new developments spilled into the surrounding countryside. Despite not using a GPS device, he said he could find any address in the city, from the historic center, a warren of one-way streets one must navigate to get near the Pantheon, the Trevi Fountain, or the Spanish Steps, to the outlying areas. I can bet you a coffee I'll know where any street is, he said. He also said he thought traffic in Rome had actually improved. Years ago, he said, there were fewer roads, so drivers stuck to known routes, clogging main arteries. For example, there was no highway linking the city to Fusanino Airport, which is on the coast between Frigian and Ostia, 2 popular beach spots. On Sundays, when Roman families would pack lunch and head to the beach, those hoping to catch a plane were out of luck. Just one long traffic jam, he recalled. Mr. Tomasi, who turned 75 in September, has decided it is time to retire. He has a few parties interested in buying his license, which is worth about 130,000 euros, about $150,000 in our money these days. You don't get rich doing this job, but it's honest work, he said. You can raise a family, put your kids through school. His eldest daughter happens to be a traffic police officer in Rome. My colleagues joke that I can do what I want because I'll never be fined, he said. Instead, I go out of my way not to break laws. He admits to one infraction early on. He got fined for forgetting to wear the yellow smock and cap that Rome taxi drivers once had to wear. For now, he's just enjoying his last fares and proudly acknowledges his silver sticker to those clients who ask. Some say, poor you, 50 years in Rome traffic, he said. Others seem pleased because it means that they can put up with it too.
The prescribed prairie fires that mark Kansas's smoky rite of spring continue to wreak havoc on Lincoln's air Wednesday. The haze initially prompted public health concerns Tuesday evening. Lincoln Public School officials, who upon the advice of Lincoln Lancaster County health officials and district health staff kept students inside Wednesday, said they were comfortable with the decision even though the haze was mostly gone by afternoon. Lincoln Public School officials kept students in from recess and canceled sports events, 12 of them. School practices were held indoors. Keeping kids inside because of air quality is a new one for LPS, but it is a little like calling a snowy day because of a weather forecast. We made the decision to cancel athletic events in a timely manner in the best interest of kids, said Communications Director Mary Kay Roth. Yes, this is something like a snow day. We must make a decision early enough to accommodate student and family schedules. And we are completely satisfied with our decision. Health officials who expressed concern over the hazardous levels of smoke in the air Tuesday commended that decision. Scott Holmes, the Lincoln Lancaster County Health Department's environmental public health manager, called it wise. Smoke levels were most hazardous for people with asthma, lung disease, other respiratory conditions, or heart disease, as well as older adults and children. Marge Thiel, supervisor of health services for LPS, said Lincoln was in the unhealthy red zone until 11 a.m., though air quality continued to improve as the afternoon wore on. Just a few students went home because of breathing problems, though she's not sure whether from allergies or the smoky haze emanating from Kansas. District Athletic Director Kathy Weiskamp said just one of the 12 canceled sporting events was a varsity contest, Northeast versus East Soccer at Seacrest. Athletic practices moved inside and the games will be rescheduled. Weiskamp said she came out of a meeting at 1 p.m. and was struck by the clarity of the air, but she noted that there were still air quality cautions. It was hard to predict what would happen in the morning, she said. The winds will do what they will, she said. To me, it's a tough decision, but it's based on the safety of our kids. Had the district not taken the precautions it did, Thiel said, she believes there would likely have been several 911 calls. I don't think we'd been talking about a second guessing if that were the case, Holmes said. City health officials have expressed concern to Kansas and to federal officials about the smoke carried into Nebraska because of prescribed burns, Holmes said. Dan Devlin of Kansas State University Center for Agricultural Resources and the Environment said Kansans understand the concern. It's smoky in Manhattan too, he said. Despite the inconvenience, these fires are an economic and ecological necessity, Devlin said. The nation's largest stretch of tallgrass prairie runs from just north of Manhattan, Kansas, clear to Oklahoma, said Devlin, the center's director. If we want the prairie to stay like it was naturally, we absolutely have to burn, Devlin said. Wildfires caused by lightning strikes and intentional burning by Native American tribes in the past replenished the prairie, Devlin said. Now, landowners get permits for prescribed burns to carry out the same mission to clear brush and invasive species, he said. Farmers also use the fires to get more nutrient-rich tallgrass that ensures better grazing for cattle herds, Devlin said. In a dry, windy spring like this one, so far, Kansans looking to burn their pastures haven't had many safe days to do so, he said. That's why there tend to be many at once, leading to the heavy smoke output, Devlin said. Counties restrict the controlled burns when conditions aren't safe, and a consortium of government and environmental agencies in Kansas advise prospective burners about the potential pollution risks to urban areas. In Nebraska, Spring Creek Prairie Audubon Center near Denton posted a planned 125-acre prescribed burn after discussing air conditions with the health department, Habitat Program Manager Ed Hubbs said. Tuesday evening, winds blew a fire in rural Lancaster County from under control to out of hand, causing $44,000 in damage to a man's pickup and sheds. Health officials know these spring fires are coming, Holmes said. We just wish the winds weren't coming the direction they're coming, he said.
Octopus escapes from an aquarium in New Zealand. It was an audacious nighttime escape. After busting through an enclosure, the nimble contortionist appears to have quietly crossed the floor, slithered through a narrow drain hole about 6 inches in diameter, and jumped into the sea. Then he disappeared. This was no Houdini, but rather a common New Zealand octopus called inky, about the size of a soccer ball. The breakout at the National Aquarium of New Zealand in Napier, which has captured the imagination of New Zealanders and made headlines around the world, apparently began when Inky slipped through a small gap at the top of his tank. Octopus tracks suggest he then scampered 8 feet across the floor and slid down a 164-foot-long drain pipe that dropped him into Hawke's Bay on the east coast of North Island. According to reports in New Zealand's news media, the aquarium's keepers noticed the escape when they came to work and discovered that Enki was not in his tank. A less independence-minded octopus, Blotchy, remained behind. The aquarium's manager, Rob Yarrow, told Radio New Zealand that employees had searched the aquarium's pipes after discovering Enki's trail to no avail. The escape happened several months ago, but it only recently came to light. He managed to make his way to one of the drain holes that go back to the ocean, and off he went, Mr. Yarrow said. Didn't even leave us a message. Enki's escape surprised few in the world of marine biology, where octopuses are known for their strength, dexterity, and intelligence. Alex Harvey, an aquarist at the Marine Biological Association in England, noted that octopuses, members of a class of marine animals including squid and cuttlefish called cephalopoda, have shown themselves to be adept at escaping through spaces as small as a coin, constrained only by their beaks, the only inflexible part of their bodies. Mrs. Harvey said that octopuses had also been documented opening jars and sneaking through tiny holes on boats, and that they could deflect predators by spraying an ink that lingers in the water and acts as a decoy. Some have been seen hauling coconut shells to build underwater shelters. Octopuses are fantastic escape artists, she said. They are programmed to hunt prey at night and have a natural inclination to move around at night. She continued, they have a complex brain, have excellent eyesight, and research suggests they have an ability to learn and form mental maps. Mrs. Harvey recalled one octopus at a British aquarium that escaped nightly from his tank, slithered to a nearby tank to snack on fish for dinner, and then went home. Octopus's intelligence, she said, was partly an evolutionary response to their habitation in complex environments, such as coral reefs, in which the animals need to hide from predators and sneak up on their prey. Enki is not the first octopus to attract the spotlight. In the summer of 2010, Paul, an octopus in Germany, gained worldwide attention when he appeared to correctly pick the winning team in all 7 of Germany's games at the World Cup in South Africa, a feat that inspired a song. He has been immortalized in Oberhausen, Germany, with a 6-foot plastic replica of him clutching a soccer ball.
A paralyzed 24-year-old man has regained some use of his right hand, controlling it with signals relayed from electronic sensors in his brain. Ian Burkhardt of Dublin, Ohio, can grasp a bottle, pour its contents into a jar, pick up a stick, and stir the liquid. He can grab a credit card and swipe it through a reader. He can also move individual fingers and hold a toothbrush. But he can do those things only for a few hours a week. In a laboratory where he is hooked up to an experimental device that interprets his brain signals and stimulates his muscles with electrodes on his forearm. With improvements, researchers hope the system will eventually aid the everyday lives of people like Burkhardt with spinal cord injuries and perhaps others with stroke or traumatic brain injury. If and when the device can be used at home, it will really increase my quality of life and independence, said Burkhardt, who is paralyzed over most of his body. Burkhardt's case is described in a paper released Wednesday by the journal Nature. It's the latest report from research that has let paralyzed people operate robotic arms, computers, and other devices with signals picked up by brain implants, or regain use of paralyzed muscles by sending signals from other muscles they still control. In contrast, the new report demonstrates that a patient can use a brain implant to stimulate his own paralyzed muscles. Burkhardt was a college freshman when he broke his neck about 6 years ago. He drove into an ocean wave and was slammed into a sandbar. As a result, he is paralyzed from the middle of his chest down, with no use of his arms below the elbow. For the experimental treatment, surgeons in 2014 placed a tiny device on his brain that includes 96 electrodes that penetrate just below the surface. It monitors a relatively small population of brain cells in the region that controls movement of his right hand, sampling the activity 3 million times a second. We're really just eavesdropping on a few conversations between those neurons, and we're trying to figure out what they're talking about, said Chad Booten, an author of the Nature paper who worked on the project while at the Bottle Memorial Institute in Columbus, Ohio. He is now at the Feinstein Institute for Medical Research in Massat, New York. When Burkhardt is in the lab, a cable is attached to a small projection from his skull to carry signals from the sensor to a computer, which interprets what movement he is trying to accomplish. Then it sends commands to an array of up to 160 electrodes strapped to his forearm. Electrical stimulation from those electrodes activates his hand and finger muscles. This is talking with one's thoughts, and within milliseconds, linking it to concrete movement, said Dr. Ozzy Razi, a study author and neurosurgeon at Ohio State University. Burkhardt said the stimulus feels like a slight tingle or buzz, noting that he has only a little sensation in his arm because of his injury. He also said his muscles tire after a while. During the first few months, he became mentally worn out from concentrating on exactly what muscles he needed to move, he said. Now it's gotten much easier, he said in an interview, but he faces a new task or what he has not done for a while. I kind of have to think about it a little bit beforehand and really think through what I'm trying to accomplish. Rizai said Burkhardt is getting faster and more fluid in his movements as he and the computer system learn from each other. Burkhardt said he'd like to participate someday in testing a next generation version of the system that could be used outside the lab. Lee Miller of Northwestern University, who has done similar research in monkeys, called the results an important step toward developing a tool for helping patients. He agreed that the forearm electrodes would probably have to be implemented, but he said the current approach is clearly a good starting point.
These are the obituaries from the Omaha World Herald. Anderson, Jesse M. Anderson, born in 1924, Bellevue Memorial Chapel, Heafy Hoffman Dwar Cutler. Astuto, Reverend Lucian S. Astuto, born in 1930. In lieu of flowers, family requests memorials to Daughters of the Eternal Father or Priestly Society of St. Peter, Our Lady of Guadalupe Seminary in Denton, Nebraska. Bethany Funeral Home, 82nd and Harrison Streets. Davis, Gail A. Davis, born in 1960. Memorials will be directed by the family. Heafy Hoffman Dwar Cutler, 51st and F Streets. DeFontaine, Marion F. DeFontaine, age 99, from Blair, Nebraska, formerly of Omaha. Funeral notice later. Seaver Sprick Funeral Home of Fort Calhoun, Nebraska. Dennis, Edna Cleo Zabel Dennis, born in 1934. Memorials to Alzheimer's Association, First Presbyterian Church, and that's the one in Bellevue, or Hillcrest Hospice. Bellevue Memorial Chapel, Heafy Hoffman Dwar and Cutler. Edson, Lloyd D. Edson, L.D. Edson, born in 1919, complete notice later. Heafy Hoffman Dwar Cutler, 51st and F Streets. Fleming, Peggy C. Fleming, Johnny and Gentleman Mortuaries, 72nd Street Chapel. Freed, Sam Freed. Donations please to Sam and Francis Freed Holocaust and Genocide Education Fund, or the University of Nebraska Foundation. Jewish Funeral Home, Omaha. Gordon, Margaret J. Peggy Gordon, born in 1937. Memorials to John L. and Margaret J. Gordon Medical Scholarship Fund at Creighton University, St. Vincent de Paul School, or Sienna Francis House. Heafy Hoffman Dwar Cutler, 51st and F Streets. Hicks, Robert W. Hicks, age 80, from Omaha, Bremen Mortuary, 72nd Street Chapel. Higgins, Mary L. Higgins, born in 1928. Memorials may be directed to the family. Heafy Hoffman Dwar Cutler, 51st and F Streets. Halsey, Richard George Halsey, age 68, from Omaha, a veteran. Donations can be made in his memory to Davis Middle School, which plans to create a model train club in remembrance of Rich, or the Henry Doorly Zoo Railroad contribution. Word of Mortuary, 108th Street Chapel. Zeros, Zygmunt Zig Zeros, born in 1926, a veteran. In lieu of flowers, memorials are suggested to Josie Harper Hospice House, Johnny Gentleman Mortuary, Pacific Street Chapel. Clamor, Hedwig Clamor, age 96, memorial suggested to Newcastle or charity of your choice. Johnny and Gentleman Mortuary, 72nd Street Chapel. Livingston, Richard M. Livingston, Rich Jr., age 73, Dugan Funeral Chapel, Fremont, Nebraska. Longstein, Karen K. Longstein. In lieu of flowers, please consider a donation to the Karen Longstein Music for Kids Memorial. Word of Mortuary, 108th Street Chapel. Karen was born in 1944. Lucas, Marcella L. Lucas, born in 1923. Memorials to Nebraska Heart Association or American Cancer Society. Heafy Hoffman Dwar Cutler, 51st and F Streets. Malik, Nellie M. Malik, born in 1931. West Lawn Hillcrest Funeral Home, 57th and Center Streets. McGee, Johnny McGee, born in 1949, a veteran. Johnny Gentleman Mortuaries, Bellevue, Sarpy County Chapel. Metzger, Kenneth Dwayne Metzger, age 92, from Syracuse, Nebraska, a veteran. Memorials to the Syracuse United Methodist Church. Fusselman Allen Harvey Funeral Home, Syracuse, Nebraska. Miller, Wayne E. Miller, born in 1946, a veteran. Rhoda Mortuary, 108th Street Chapel. Passian, Evelina C. Passian, age 82, Bethany Funeral Home, 82nd and Harrison Streets. Polankik, Anthony Joseph Polankik, age 68, from Central City, Nebraska. Sold Wagner Funeral Home, Central City, Nebraska. Ruthenell, Ethan Robert Ruthenell, born in 2014. Memorials may be directed to the family. Heafy Hoffman Dwar Cutler, 51st and F Streets. Ruzicka, Charles Bohemel Ruzicka, age 87, of Colon, Nebraska, a veteran. Memorials to Saunders County Lost Pets or Saunders County Food Pantry, Svoboda Funeral Home, Wahoo, Nebraska. Schmaderer, Robert G. Schmaderer, age 92, from West Point, Nebraska, a veteran. The family suggests memorials be directed to the GACC endowment in Bob's name. Minnick Funeral Home, West Point, Nebraska. Shunky, John L. Shunky, Senior Master Sergeant, U.S. Air Force, retired, born in 1936. Memorials to be directed by the family: Bellevue Memorial Chapel, Heafy Hoffman Dwar Cutler. Syker, Catherine Syker, RSCJ. Memorial contributions may be made to the Society of the Sacred Heart, St. Louis, Missouri. Catherine was born in 1920. Shada, Mark F. Shada, born in 1955. Memorials to the family for later designation: John A. Gellman Mortuaries, 72nd Street Chapel. Scheidler, Richard E. Dick Scheidler, born in 1940. Memorial suggested to St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, Keeler Dulce Mortuary, Papillion, Nebraska. Sims, Trudy M. Sims, age 63, Thomas Funeral Home, 3920 North 24th Street, Omaha. Stewart, James Albert Stewart Jr., born in 1927, a veteran. Memorials to Merrymakers, 12020 Shamrock Plaza, Omaha. West Lawn Hillcrest Funeral Home, 57th and Center Streets. Salentic, Peggy L. Salentic, born in 1969. In lieu of flowers, memorials to St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, Heafy Hoffman Dwar Cutler, 51st and F Streets. Tatro Foley, Viola J. Tatro Foley, born in 1936. Memorials suggested to Nebraska Humane Society or Springfield, Nebraska United Methodist Church. West Lawn Hillcrest Funeral Home, 57th and Center Streets. Van Horn, Russell E. Van Horn, age 81, a veteran. Memorials are suggested to King of Kings Lutheran Church, which is 116th and I Streets, Omaha, or American Heart Association. Heafy Hoffman Dwar Cutler, 51st and F Streets. Von Tersch, Gloria Collins Von Tersch, Forest Lawn Funeral Home, 7909 Mormon Bridge Road, Omaha. Voss, Luann K. Voss, born in 1961. In lieu of flowers, memorials to the University of Nebraska Foundation, bone marrow transplantation. West Lawn Hillcrest Funeral Home, 57th and Center Streets. Weatherly, Laura L. Weatherly, age 56. Memorials are suggested to the Nova Treatment Community in Laura Weatherly's name. Forest Lawn Funeral Home, 7909 Mormon Bridge Road. Welch, Rosemary Welch, born in 1925. Memorials to Discovery Presbyterian Church, which is at 46th and Monroe Streets in Omaha. Bellevue Memorial Chapel, Heafy Hoffman Dwar Cutler.
The following are the obituaries from the Lincoln Journal-Star. Bruce, Ann E. Bruce, born 1941. In lieu of flowers, please make donations in Ann's honor to the Friendship Home of Lincoln, Roper and Sons Funeral Home. Frank, Doris M. Frank, age 85, graveside service 1:30 p.m. on Saturday, April 16 at Seward Cemetery. Memorials in care of the Doris Frank family for future designations. Arrangements entrusted to Zabka Funeral Home, Seward, Nebraska. Hirschner, Lad Hirschner, age 67 of Utica, passed away on April 9, 2016. There will be a private family service. Visit vocalfuneralhome.com. Higgins, Don Higgins, age 81, and Joyce Higgins, age 80, departed this world on the same day, April 8, 2016. They were born on October 13, 1 year apart. Don served his country as an aircraft mechanic in the United States Air Force. A memorial service will be held 10 a.m. April 16 at Roper and Sons Funeral Home. Memorials may be given to the food bank of Lincoln or to the donor's choice. Lauterbach, Truman Doc F. Lauterbach, age 94, of Sprague. He was born 1922, celebration of life, Monday, April 18th at Kunze Funeral Home, Crete, Nebraska. Memorials to the family. Marshallek, John T. Marshallek, age 90, of Raymond, a veteran. Mass of Christian burial will be held at St. Mary's Joseph Church in Valparaiso. Interment with military honors at St. Joseph Cemetery. Memorials to Saints Mary and Joseph Catholic Church. Pape, Orland Henry Pape, age 79, of Lincoln, a veteran. Memorials to the Kansas Audubon and St. Teresa Catholic Church in care of Marjorie Pape. Peregrine, J.T. Bud Peregrine, age 94, of Lincoln, formerly of Endicott and Grant. Memorials to the Horrison Hospice, Lincoln, or Family's Choice. Gerdes Meyer Funeral Home, Fairbury, is in charge of arrangements. Phillips, Wayne Phillips, a Navy veteran. Memorials to the Southwest Fire Department, 705 West Burnham Street, Lincoln, or the Capital Humane Society of Lincoln. Quinn, Lyle Browse Quinn of Fairbury, born 1918, a veteran. He served in World War II in the Army. Gerdes Meyer Funeral Home in Fairbury is in charge of the arrangements. Shawmatter, Robert G. Shawmatter, age 92, of West Point, a veteran. Interment with military honors will be at St. Michael's Cemetery, Mimic Funeral Home of West Point. The family suggests that memorials be directed to the GACC endowment in Bob's honors. Schultz, Judith Ray Vernon Schultz, age 76, of rural Perce. A celebration will be Saturday, April 16th at the Christ Methodist Church, 45th and A Streets. Sullivan, James Jim Dale Sullivan, age 84, from Utica. Mass of Christmas burial will be 10 a.m. Monday, April 18 at St. Joseph Catholic Church, York, Nebraska. Tamke, Teresa Terry Lynn Tamke, age 62, of Lincoln. The memorial service will be held 1 p.m. Friday at Bethuras Master and Love Funeral Home. Memorials are suggested to the family for future designation. Tice, Jerry L. Tice, age 69, of Lincoln, a veteran. In lieu of flowers, our memorials are suggested to Hope Community Church, Cornhusker Early Ford V8 Club, or March of Dimes. Bethuras Master and Love Funeral Home, 4040 A Street, Lincoln. Worley, Geneva M. Worley, age 93, of Lincoln. She was born 1922. Memorials to the family for the future designation, Lincoln Memorial Funeral Home. Listeners, memorials to the Radio Talking Book Network are tax deductible and will go a long way in keeping Radio Talking Book on the air. Please keep Radio Talking Book in mind when memorials are listed as Donor's Choice or your favorite charity. Donations should be sent to Radio Talking Book Network, 7101 Newport Avenue, Suite 205, Omaha, Nebraska 68152. Thank you for being a Radio Talking Book Network listener and supporter.
All right. Well, that brings us right to our break. We have a little announcement about an event coming up, and then we'll be right back to your library for you.
Hello, everyone. And Howard here, and I would like to invite you to an event coming up on Friday, June the 3rd, 2016, from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Where will this event be held? It will be held at 1313 Fire Street, and this is at the Nebraska Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired. What are we doing? The EFB Omaha chapter will be hosting a non-visual training day introducing non-visual skills such as braille, team travel, computers, and home management. Learn how effective non-visual skills can be taught by blind and visually impaired people who use these skills every day. Anyone would like to participate in this event, please register before May the 7th. There is no charge for participation. Lunches will be provided. In order to register, visit www.ne.nfb.org, or you may call 402-350-1735. We would like to invite everybody to come out and to participate in this fun-filled day of learning. Thank you.
All right. Well, it takes us to the end of your break. I want you to remember that this figure of Radio Talking Book Network, your print information network, serving Nebraska and its neighboring states. The Radio Talking Book Network is brought to you with cooperation from KIOS-FM in Omaha and statewide through the NET Radio Network. So that brings us back to your live reading, and that means I have to take you back to the gentleman in the studio, and I'm going to take it over to them, and then get right back on your live reading for you.
Thanks, Emily. Teenager in affluenza case is sentenced to jail from Fort Worth, Texas. Ethan Couch, the teenager who used an affluenza defense in a drunken driving crash that killed 4 people and then violated probation by traveling to Mexico with his mother, was sentenced on Wednesday to nearly 2 years in jail. Mr. Couch, who turned 19 on Monday, had previously avoided a harsher punishment because he was sentenced in juvenile court, where the emphasis is on rehabilitation. But after his foray to Mexico last year, prosecutors moved the case to adult court. On Wednesday, a district court judge, Wayne F. Selvant, ruled that Mr. Couch must spend 720 days in Tarrant County Jail, 180 days for each count of intoxication manslaughter. The judge said the court would reconvene in 2 weeks to consider modifying the terms after each side submitted additional written arguments. Nothing I do is in stone, so I might reconsider, Judge Selvant said. Mr. Couch showed no emotion as the sentence was read. He will remain in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day for his protection. D. Anderson, Tarrant County's sheriff, told reporters after the hearing. Family members of those who were killed or injured in the accident and who were in the courtroom declined to comment. Ethan's father, Fred Couch, who was in court, also declined to comment. Judge Selvant has imposed a gag order preventing prosecutors and defense lawyers from discussing the case outside the courtroom. Sheriff Anderson said Mr. Couch had created 0 issues since he was placed in Tarrant County Jail in January. I do believe Ethan Couch is not the same person he was when he came to jail, he said. The time he's spent, it's a rude awakening for anyone. If the case had remained in juvenile court, Mr. Couch's probation would have ended on his 19th birthday. The case dates from June 15, 2013, when Mr. Couch, who was 16 at the time, and a group of friends stole beer from a store, had a party at his parents' house, and then went for a drive. Mr. Couch, who was behind the wheel, hit 4 people on the side of a road outside Burleson, a suburb of Fort Worth, killing them. A passenger in Mr. Couch's vehicle was paralyzed and suffered brain damage. Hours after his arrest, Mr. Couch had a blood alcohol level of 0.24, 3 times the legal limit for drivers in Texas. Mr. Couch's case received widespread attention after a defense witness argued that Mr. Couch suffered from affluenza, a term used to describe psychological problems that can afflict children of privilege. A juvenile court judge, Gene Boyd, subsequently declined to give him the punishment sought by Tarrant County prosecutors, 20 years in prison, and ordered him to be placed in a long-term treatment facility while on 10-year probation. The decision angered the families of those Mr. Couch killed and injured. Others questioned whether a teenager with a less affluent background would have received similar leniency. In December, prosecutors began investigating whether Mr. Couch had violated his probation after a video posted online appeared to show him at a party where alcohol was being consumed. Then Mr. Couch vanished. He later turned up with his mother, Tanya Couch, in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, where they were arrested. Mrs. Couch has been charged with hindering apprehension. Because he had fled, Mr. Couch was placed in juvenile detention after being brought back to Texas, but prosecutors did not pursue a specific penalty in juvenile court for a probation violation because Mr. Couch would have aged out of the system once he turned 19. Instead, Mr. Couch's case was moved to adult court, which led to Wednesday's hearing. Once he serves his jail sentence, Mr. Couch will have probation conditions similar to those imposed on him when he was a juvenile, Judge Selvin said on Wednesday. Under the conditions, he will be prohibited from leaving the Fort Worth area without approval from probation or court officials. Mr. Couch will not be allowed to drive or to consume alcohol and must look for a job. Judge Selvin said that Mr. Couch would also be required to perform community service, but that he had not yet determined how many hours the teenager should perform.
The following is the lead editorial from the Lincoln Journal-Star, and it's captioned, "Hearing a Different Drummer." Nebraska's unusual system of allocating its electoral college votes continues to lead a charmed life. A bill to restore the winner-take-all system died mere inches from the finish line after Senators Tommy Garrett and Bob Christ, who switched their support for ending a filibuster on the Hill to opposition on the final reading. That left proponents of the winner-take-all system 1 vote short of the 33 votes necessary to end the filibuster, which would have allowed the legislative majority to send the bill to Governor Pete Ricketts. The outcome brings joy to partisan Democrats. It also brings a smile to those with a fondness for Nebraska's quirky spirit of independence, exemplified most notably in the state's unique nonpartisan one-house legislature. Of the 50 states, only Nebraska and Maine split their electoral college on the basis of the votes in each congressional district. The attempt in this year's session marks the 15th time that an attempt to revert Nebraska back to the winner-take-all system has gone down to defeat. That Nebraska has the split vote system at all is something of a miracle. Yellowing clips in the Journal-Star's paper library recount that the bill introduced by Senator Deanna Schmick passed by a narrow 25-23 margin in 1991. Back in those days, the Democratic Party was more of a force in Nebraska. The bill was supported by the 21 Democrats in the legislature, joined by Senator Ernie Chambers and independent, and Republican Senators Dennis Bach of Kimball and David Bernard Stevens of North Platte and Brad Ashford of Omaha. Ashford, currently a Democrat serving in the House of Representatives, was at the time going through a Republican phase. The bill, which passed on a 25-23 vote, was signed by then Governor Ben Nelson, who later vetoed two bills that would have returned Nebraska to the old system. In all the years since then, Nebraska has split its electoral college votes only once. In 2008, Barack Obama posted a victory margin of only 1,260 votes in the 2nd congressional district and collected the first electoral vote from Nebraska for a Democratic presidential candidate in 44 years. Consider the overwhelming forces arrayed on the state's political landscape in favor of winner-take-all system. It seems inevitable that eventually they will prevail. Nebraskans who prefer the road less traveled should enjoy it while they can. The following on the editorial page is by columnist George Will of the Washington Post Writers Group. There is a consensus that aggression by one nation against another is a serious matter, but there is no comparable consensus about what constitutes aggression. Waging aggressive war was one charge against Nazi leaders in the 1946 Nuremberg war crimes trial, but 70 years later, it is unclear that aggression properly understood must involve war as commonly understood, or that war in today's context of novel destruction capabilities must involve the use of armed force, which the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court says is constitutive of an act of aggression. Cyber skills can serve espionage, the surreptitious acquisition of information, which is older than nations and not an act of war. But how should we categorize cyber skills employed not to acquire information and not to supplement military force, but to damage another nation's physical infrastructure? In World War II, the United States and its allies sent fleets of bombers over to Germany to destroy important elements of its physical infrastructure, steel mills, ball bearing plants, etc. Bombers were, however, unnecessary when the United States and Israel wanted to destroy some centrifuges crucial to Iran's nuclear weapons program. They used the Stuxnet compass worm to accelerate or slow processes at Iran Natri's uranium enrichment facilities, damaging or even fragmenting centrifuges necessary for producing weapons-grade material. According to Slate magazine columnist Fred Kaplan, by early 2010, approximately 2,000 of 87,000 were damaged beyond repair, and even after the Iranians later learned what was happening, another 1,000 of the then remaining 5,000 were taken out of commission. For fascinating details on the episodes mentioned above and to understand how deeply we have drifted into legally and politically uncharted waters, read Kaplan's new book, Dark Territory, The Secret History of Cyber War. 3 of its lessons are that cyber war resembles war. Much of it is very secret, and everything essential to the functioning of modern society is vulnerable. The things controlled by or through computers include not just military assets, command and control system, the guidance mechanisms of smart munitions, etc., but also hospitals, electric power grids, waterworks, the valves of dams, and the financial transactions of banks. And Kaplan notes, unlike nuclear weapons or the ballistic systems to deliver them, cyber weapons do not require large-scale industrial projects or concentrations of scientists with scarce skills. All that is needed to paralyze a complex society and panic its population is a room full of computers and a small core of people trained to use them. Clearly, the United States needs a cyber deterrent capacity, the ability to do unto adversaries anything they might try to undo us. One problem, however, is that it can be difficult to prove the source of a cyber attack, such as that which Vladimir Putin did not acknowledge launching, but almost certainly did launch in 2007 to punish Estonia for annoying Russia. To appreciate how computer keystrokes can do damage comparable to a sustained air campaign using high explosives, consider what happened in 1995 in the private sector. Barings, founded in 1762, was Britain's oldest merchant bank, having weathered the Napoleonic Wars and 2 World Wars, and its clients, including Queen Elizabeth. One of its young traders, Nick Leeson, in the bank's Singapore office, was so skillful at navigating the derivatives markets that at one point he produced 10% of the bank's profit. Inadequately supervised, he created a secret Barings account from which he made risky bets, including a huge one on Japan's stock market rising. He did not, however, anticipate the Kobe earthquake. Japan's stock market plunged, causing enormous losses in Leeson's accounts that Barings could not cover. The bank quickly collapsed and was bought by a Dutch company for £1 British. If one rogue trader's recklessness, motivated by mere avarice, can quietly and quickly annihilate a vulnerable institution, imagine what havoc can be wrought by battalions of militarized cyber warriors implacably implementing a nation's destructive agenda. It is a long time past for urgent public discussion of the many new meanings that can be given to Shakespeare's "Cry havoc and let slip the dogs of war."
Outrageous sentences for marijuana. Lee Carroll Brooker, a 75-year-old disabled veteran suffering from chronic pain, was arrested in July 2011 for growing 36 marijuana plants for his own medicinal use behind his son's house in Dothan, Alabama, where he lived. For this crime, Mr. Brooker was given a life sentence with no possibility of release. Alabama law mandates that anyone with certain prior felony convictions be sentenced to life without parole for possessing more than 1 kilogram or 2.2 pounds of marijuana, regardless of the intent to sell. Mr. Brooker had been convicted of armed robberies in Florida 2 decades earlier, for which he served 10 years. The marijuana plants collected at his son's house, including unusable parts like vines and stalks, weighed 2.8 pounds. At his sentencing, the trial judge told Mr. Brooker that if he could sentence you to a term that is less than life without parole, I would. Last year, Roy Moore, Chief Justice of the Alabama Supreme Court, called Mr. Brooker's sentence excessive and unjustified and said it revealed grave flaws in the state's sentencing laws, but the court still upheld the punishment. On Friday, the United States Supreme Court will consider whether to hear Mr. Brooker's challenge to his sentence, which he argues violates the 8th Amendment's ban on cruel and unusual punishments. The justices should take the case and overturn this sentence. Life without parole, second only to the death penalty in severity, should never be a mandatory sentence for any crime, much less for simple possession of marijuana, which is not even a crime in many parts of the country. If this punishment is ever meted out, it should be by a judge who has carefully weighed the individual circumstances of a case. Besides Alabama, only South Dakota, Louisiana, and Mississippi have such laws. In Mississippi, possession of barely 1 ounce of marijuana is enough to trigger a mandatory sentence of life without parole for someone with prior convictions for certain felonies. Almost everywhere else, public attitudes and policy toward drugs in general and marijuana in particular have changed significantly. 23 states and the District of Columbia have legalized medical marijuana, and 4 states, along with D.C., have fully legalized its possession for recreational use. In most states, the maximum sentence for possessing less than 3 pounds of marijuana is at most 5 years. In other words, Mr. Brooker's punishment for marijuana possession is the definition of cruel and unusual. He received a punishment typically reserved for the most violent crimes like murder, rape, and terrorism, even though he poses no threat to society. The trial court even allowed him to remain free while he awaited his sentencing. In 1991, the Supreme Court upheld a state law that mandated life without parole for possession of less than 1.5 pounds of cocaine. Justice Anthony Kennedy, who concurred in that opinion, has since spoken out on the scourge of mandatory minimum sentences, which he said are often unwise and unjust and represent a misguided transfer of power from judges to prosecutors. The court has already banned mandatory death sentences and mandatory life without parole sentences for juveniles, both on the grounds that the Eighth Amendment must adapt to the evolving standards of decency that mark the progress of a maturing society. By that standard, and given rapidly evolving public opinion on marijuana, no one should be sent to prison forever for possessing a small amount of marijuana for medical or personal use. And a couple letters to the editor. Act on the Refugee Crisis. To the editor, Bono, in April 12, makes the case that what's needed to address the biggest refugee crisis since World War II is a Marshall Plan for refugee protection. Increased humanitarian and development assistance is essential, but refugee protection is not just about relief. It's about rights, the right to flee, to cross borders in search of protection, and to enjoy fundamental human rights. A crisis of this magnitude requires a coordinated and comprehensive plan of action, and that will not happen without American leadership. Where is the United States? Once a world leader in refugee resettlement, today it has admitted only a paltry number of Syrians in desperate need. To lead by example, the United States must significantly increase the number of refugees it takes in. President Obama should use the high-level refugee summit meeting he will host in September to demonstrate that the United States is fully prepared to take serious action to address this global humanitarian and security challenge. Elisa Massimino, President and Chief Executive of Human Rights First in Washington, D.C., and lies about combat in Iraq. Regarding, to the editor, regarding new focus on U.S. role in Iraq, page 12, April 12. As a psychotherapist working closely with our military and veterans, I am deeply troubled by your article about a Marine's death on a secret Iraqi base. I am concerned not only for the family of this fallen Marine, but also for all of us being misled by leadership disguising the realities of war. It is tragic enough that another American son has fallen, but when families in the nation are told that he and others are not counted as being deployed in the combat zone because they are on temporary assignment or there less than 4 months, when the public is told that our Marines are on fire complexes rather than fire bases so that they sound safer, when we are told combat operations were over while we are still sending troops to fight and be killed in that same region, we are fed a series of lies. We all need to know the truth about our troops, hardships, and danger, support their families, and debate policy in an open and honest manner. Anything less harms our entire democracy. The ancient Greeks taught that inaccurate language poisons the soul. To the extent that our language about war hides its terrible truths, we are all being poisoned. Edward Tick from Troy, New York, and he is the author of War and the Soul and Warrior's Return and founder of Soldier's Heart.
Dear Amy, my parents got divorced when I was a toddler. My father was very abusive, verbally and physically, so I did not have a relationship with him aside from the very few court-ordered visits he showed up to. My mother died when I was 10, and my dad had no interest in raising me, so I spent time in foster homes before finally landing with the family of a friend. Grown now and with children of my own, I have always wanted to reach out to my dad. I've invited him to my kids' birthdays and called occasionally. Although I knew I would never receive an apology from him, as he doesn't see anything wrong with how he treated us, I was shocked when we met for lunch and he expected me to apologize for the awful things I said to him as a child. I do not remember these incidents, but I did apologize, hoping we could move on. I can't help to resent him and find it ridiculous that he can hold a grudge for those things I might have said when I was a child. How can I tell him how I feel? I know it's silly to expect an apology, but I would still like to tell him my feelings. Would a letter be acceptable, as he rarely answers or returns my calls? Or am I better off keeping my feelings to myself? Signed, Estranged Daughter. Dear daughter, you are trying to have a relationship with your father, but the abusive and neglectful father who abandoned you as a child has obviously not magically morphed into a loving and kindly grandfather to your children. His manipulative insistence on some sort of apology from you is evidence that he is not equipped to be in a family in the way you want him to be. Write your father a letter. Tell him every single thing you want to say. Ask for what you want. If you want him to be involved in your family and your family's life, then tell him that, offering ideas of how that might be possible. Make a copy of that letter to keep. I predict no response, or a negative, possibly very negative response when your father really throws it down, possibly dragging you and your late mother through the mud. However, all of this might help you make a better sense of your own situation, growing up and now. You may have to mourn the loss of possibility, which your father has always represented, but then you should celebrate what a stellar survivor and success you are and hug your own children extra close. Given the extreme challenge of your childhood, professional therapy could have a profound impact on you. Dear Amy, my daughter is headed to college in the fall. I have always tried to have an open conversation about dating, sex, alcohol, consequences, and healthy choices, but college is a whole new adventure. Can you recommend any resource that would help me with a discussion about sex, hookups, date rape, binge drinking, drugs, and healthy choices? Signed, Worried Mom. Dear Worried, there are several frankly written guides designed to help students prepare for the reality of college life. One guide I like is published by the people behind hercampus.com, which is an internet site with on-campus chapters of women at several colleges across the country. Check out, quote, the Her Campus Guide to College Life, How to Manage Relationships, Stay Safe and Healthy, Handle Stress, and Have the Best Years of Your Life by Stephen Kaplan Lewis, Annie Chandler Wang, Windsor Hanger Western, and the Her Campus editors, Adams Media. Dear Amy, I read your column regularly and had to comment on the letter from Worried Mother, who has a mother-in-law who clearly favors one grandchild over his siblings. We had a similar situation with our children. The oldest could do no wrong, went on special visits, received gifts, and had her own room at Grandma's house. While it wasn't the only factor in our decision, it was definitely part of our reason we moved 600 miles away. That was 25 years ago, and I can say it was one of the best decisions we ever made. I hope this grandmother reads your column and takes heed. Signed, Happy We Left. Dear Happy, I've received scores of responses from parents and from other adults whose grandparents openly favored siblings. The effect of over-favoritism seems to last for a lifetime.
A Rookie Learns to Fly a Drone by Farshand S. Rao from London. My wife Alexa has made something of a profession out of getting me great birthday presents. Over the years, her gifts have included an old Sports Illustrated with a hologram of Michael Jordan on the cover and a photography tour of a particularly photogenic part of southern China. So for my most recent birthday, I had no idea what to expect when she handed me a large box. Inside, I found a new drone. The only problem, I had to learn how to fly it. This may not be easy for many people. First, there is a matter of figuring out the capabilities of the drone. Consumer drones come in different sizes and prices. You can build your own drone, attach a GoPro camera, and customize a range of options. Or you can get one that works right out of the box. Flying the drone is daunting. There are regulations to know. In the United States, because the industry is relatively new, federal rules are sometimes at odds with regulations set by states and local authorities. In Britain, where I live, rules for flying hobbyist drones are mercifully more straightforward, and the Civil Aviation Authority has taken steps to translate often dense guidance into easier to understand language. In July, it released the Drone Code and has published an animated video summarizing the rules. There is also the safety of others to consider. British aviation authorities recorded 39 airprox incidents or aerial near misses in 2015. And those are just ones that involve a drone and another aircraft. I did not want to make headlines, but there are ways to ease into it. Commercial drone operators and those taking professional videos can take short courses to ensure they know what they are doing. For novices like myself, YouTube videos abound, offering tips and explainers. Not everybody who can control things on the ground has a 3D spatial awareness, said Jonathan Carter, a director of the Aerial Academy, which conducts courses to help professional drone users get licensed by the Civil Aviation Authority. Mr. Carter, who first strapped a compact camera to a single rotor drone in 2010 out of curiosity, said the courses could be completed in as little as a week and cost about $1,600. For me, the first step was evaluating my drone, a DJI Phantom 3. DJI, which is based in Shenzhen in southern China, makes more small-scale drones than any other manufacturer, and the Phantom series has been the world's best-selling consumer drone. The company was founded in 2006 and has been valued at around $8 billion. My Phantom 3 Standard cost about $635. Weighing less than 3 pounds, it is a white plastic quadcopter with an attached camera that shoots video at 2.7K and captures 12 megapixel photos. I could fit the entire system, the drone, detachable propellers, and the remote control in my backpack. The instructions for flying the drone were straightforward. Simply download DJI's mobile phone app, attach the propellers to the machine, turn the drone and remote controller on, and the app guides you through the setup process. For beginners, DJI's app offers a basic mode that restricts the drone to an altitude and distance of 100 feet. All you need to do to initiate takeoff is tap an on-screen button on your smartphone and then swipe to confirm. After that, you are airborne. Everything is controlled with the mobile app in tandem with the remote controller, and you can have as much or as little assistance as you want. Landing can be completely manually or automatically. While in the air, you can control the drone yourself or use one of a handful of intelligent modes that lets you instruct it to circle a single point, follow you without changing distance or altitude, or trace a predetermined set of directions. If your battery is about to run out, it immediately comes back to its takeoff point. So far, so good. The next task was assessing the rules of flying in my area. Where I live, there are a few geographic restrictions. Basically, stay away from the airports, Parliament, and royal parks like Kensington Gardens. Over the coming years, though, those regulations may be in flux, according to Peter Lee, a consultant at the law firm Taylor Venters. I think the catalyst would be some kind of catastrophic event that would really force the public narrative down the track of stricter regulations, said Mr. Lee, who owns 2 drones. After learning the local regulations, my wife and I chose Battersea Park in the southwestern part of the city for a first flight. There we found a relatively quiet area. Though the market for civilian drones is apparently growing fast, the chief executive of 3D Robotics, a DJI competitor, said in October 2014 that it was worth $1 billion, and forecasts almost uniformly predict rapid expansion. I was the only person at the park with one. Following the instructions, I turned everything on, and with minimal effort, the drone rose above me. People nearby slowed to watch, and my wife snapped a couple of pictures on her iPhone. Boys with their toys, she said later. It was all remarkably easy, albeit brief. More on that later. The drone was comfortable to maneuver, the app was easy to use, and the video that the drone was recording was sharp. Everything was saved on a micro SD card, meaning it can be popped into many laptops or some TVs and viewed, edited, and shared without much trouble. I have kept my videos on a laptop, but I'm cutting together a couple of videos to put on YouTube eventually. Crucially, it was fun. Seeing your surroundings from a different angle is interesting and adds a cool element to the experience. I have lived here for several years on and off, but I now want to re-explore places I've already been to just use the Phantom and see them from above. The drone is not without limitations. The battery life is frustratingly short. In all, I got about 20 minutes of HD video capture on a full charge, a number that is in line with DJI's advertised battery capacity. At various points, the camera's real-time display also would disconnect. And on another clear day in the park, the app told me I did not have a strong enough GPS connection to use some of the intelligent modes. DJI said this was most likely because of the Phantom 3 standards reliance on Wi-Fi rather than Lightbridge, the company's wireless communication technology, which has a longer range. The technology is used in DJI's newer and more advanced models. Windy days also made flying a little tougher, though by no means very difficult. Being in an urban setting, I tried to fly the quadcopter high enough to make sure people in the area did not feel as though I was spying on them, restricting the things I could try out. Partly because of the drone's own stability and an overabundance of caution on my part, I never crashed it, but it did flip over once because I landed too quickly while trying to keep it from being grabbed by a curious dog. Overall, I cannot complain. Spring is here, and the city, thankfully, has a lot of green space for drone flying. Also, I have a couple of vacations planned, and I am already thinking about how best to use my birthday present.
CSX Railroad said Wednesday it plans to continue cutting costs this year to deal with slowing freight volume and declining profit. Executives at the Jacksonville, Florida-based railroad discussed their outlook Wednesday, one day after reporting a 19% drop in first quarter profit. I'm really pleased with how we responded, Chairman and CEO Michael Ward said. CSX said it reduced expenses by about $270 million in the quarter and plans additional cuts through the year. About 2,000 workers have been furloughed, and about 400 of the railroad's locomotives are parked. CSX said coal demand remains anemic, and it expects to haul roughly 25% less coal this year. The strong U.S. dollar and weak commodity prices are hurting other shipments. CSX is the latest railroad to announce additional cuts to deal with declining freight demand. Omaha-based Union Pacific last week furloughed 73 workers at its North Platte Railroad yard. According to the North Platte Telegraph, the 73 workers furloughed include 25 electricians, 29 machinists, 14 firemen oilers, and 5 sheet metal workers. Burlington Northern Railway, which employs nearly 2,000 people in Lincoln, has furloughed 4,600 employees, CEO Matt Ross said at an energy conference last month. This amounts to 10% of its overall workforce. The company has not specified where the furloughs have occurred. Burlington Northern has stopped all hiring and has offered a buyout program to older employees as it tries to deal with a decline in freight volumes. The railroad's struggles have sparked merger efforts. Canadian Pacific tried for months to acquire Norfolk Southern before dropping its bid last week. Any potential merger would face high hurdles because of the railroad's size and potential concerns about loss of competition. No major railroad mergers have been approved since the Federal Surface Transportation Board adopted tough rules for them in 2001. WRD, the CXX CEO, said there's room for railroads to continue improving their operations without merging, especially because there is little overlap in tracks among the major railroads. There's not even a lot of economic sense to it, said Ward, who twice rebuffed Canadian Pacific's efforts to initiate merger talks with his railroad in the last 18 months. Dateline Omaha. The head of Berkshire Hathaway's biggest insurance company, one of the Berkshire Hathaway's biggest insurance companies, is retiring. Spokeswoman Sue Johnson said Tuesday that General Ray CEO Tad Montross will retire at the end of 2016. The way Berkshire's large reinsurance company is managed will change after Montross's retirement. Montross currently reports directly to Berkshire CEO Warren Buffett, but his successor will report to Ajit Jan, who already runs another reinsurance unit at Berkshire. Jan will also choose the next CEO of Stamford, Connecticut-based Gen Ray. Many investors who follow Berkshire say Jan is one of the leading candidates to eventually succeed Buffett as CEO. Buffett regularly praises Jan's ability to evaluate insurance risk and generate underwriting profits, but Berkshire has never named its internal candidate to succeed the 85-year-old Buffett.
No remorse for killing, lawyer says, from New Orleans. An enraged driver chased down the car of the former defensive end Will Smith, deliberately rammed it from behind, angrily confronted him in the street, and then shot him 8 times, yelling over his dying body as his wounded wife tried to crawl away, the Smith family's lawyer said Wednesday. Smith's wife, Rockwell, wanted everyone to know that Smith, who played 9 seasons for the New Orleans Saints, was her Superman, and that he died trying to protect her, said the lawyer, Peter Thompson. But Smith never pulled out his own handgun, which remained loaded but unused in a compartment inside his Mercedes sport utility vehicle, Thompson said. 4 days after the fatal shooting, Thompson laid out a version, the events that he said was based on the recollections of Rockwell Smith and other witnesses, seeking to dispel what he called lies and factual distortion spread by the man whom the police identified as Smith's killer, Cardell Hayes. In the tumultuous aftermath of Smith's death, competing narratives have emerged about the minutes leading up to the shooting. The police are still sorting through facts, witness statements, and videos as the grieving city copes with the loss of one of its sports heroes. A lawyer for Hayes, who is jailed on $1 million bond after being arrested on murder charges, said his client had felt threatened and had not been the aggressor. Thompson, however, said the Smiths had been enjoying a regular night with some friends before they encountered Hayes. Suddenly, this Hummer drove up at great speed behind them and rammed into them violently, causing their back windshield to shatter, their heads to whip back, and their car to hit the Chevy Impala in front of them, said Thompson, who described the ramming of the car as aggravated battery. Hayes and his passenger then got out and angrily approached Smith's vehicle. Smith got out too and asked why they were attacking him. Thompson said, Smith's wife and their female passenger then got out to defuse the situation, walking Smith back to his car, but the killer follows, Thompson said. Suddenly, 2 shots are fired, Thompson said. She is shot immediately in both legs, and she collapses. Either immediately or moments thereafter, the killer unloads 6 to 8 shots into Will's back. He added, I can tell you the killer showed no remorse whatsoever. The coroner's report, released Wednesday, said 7 of the bullets hit Smith's back and 1 hit the left side of his chest. Throughout the confrontation, Smith's licensed handgun remained in a compartment inside his car, Thompson said. Smith had a permit to carry a concealed weapon in Louisiana. The police confirmed that a 9mm handgun, loaded but unfired, had been found inside Smith's vehicle. Police also said Hayes, age 28, acknowledged at the scene that he had fired his .45 caliber handgun at Smith and his wife. Another gun, also loaded but unfired, was found inside Hayes' Hummer. An additional charge for Raquel Smith's injury is pending, the police said. She was hit twice, Thompson said. 1 bullet fractured her right femur near the knee, and another passed through her left thigh into her left knee. This has been very traumatic for her, devastating for her and her children, her lawyer said. We believe she will recover physically. The emotional scars, however, she may never recover from. These will last forever for both her and her children. There is no dispute at this point that the shooting was precipitated by an earlier encounter. Hayes' lawyer, John Fuller, described it as a hit and run and insisted that his client would be vindicated once the full story emerged. He said Hayes had responsibly called 911 and was following the vehicle that hit him to read the license plate number just before the fatal confrontation. Thompson rebutted that, saying that Hayes' vehicle had stopped suddenly, causing Smith to brake quickly, and if any contact had happened between them, it was so slight that the 2 couples thought the cars might not have touched at all. The consensus in the car was, we didn't hit this vehicle, there's no damage. It's late at night, so out of concern for their safety, and because they don't know why the Hummer had stopped so suddenly, and seeing no damage whatsoever, they continued, Thompson said. There was nothing Will Smith could have ever said to justify the shooting, Thompson concluded. The case has riveted New Orleans, a city in which Smith, age 34, was a fan favorite. Born in New York, Smith joined the Saints from Ohio State and quickly became a team leader. After retirement, he chose to stay in New Orleans, showing commitment to the city as it continued to recover from Hurricane Katrina and supporting a foundation that helped women and children. Smith's father, Will Smith Sr., speaking from Durham, North Carolina, said he forgave Hayes. He told WTVD that he was not interested in a trial and that nothing that happened in the court system would bring back his son. A public visitation will be held Friday to honor Smith.
The following article is by Brian Christopherson, the sports reporter of the Lincoln Journal-Star. Oh, geez, that's a mirror. Whoa, there's Randy Gregory. Okay, I see you, Kenny Bell. Tyler Hops is not going to play it all cool now and pretend that he wasn't a bit starstruck the first day he wore the Husker uniform and took a look at his surroundings. I was like, wow, this is amazing. Am I even on the same level? He grew up in Lincoln. His uncle had season tickets. If he wasn't sitting in the stadium on those fall Saturdays, the big screen at home was covered with Big Red. Playing for them, though, that seemed like a big dream. Hops's Husker bio is a little different from some of those scholarship recruits. His description of his playing days at Lincoln Southwest notes that he had collected all city and all Heartland Conference honors as a senior. Then he looked at his college opportunities and chose to play football at Wayne State. Nothing wrong with that. He caught 5 passes for 49 yards and a touchdown. He also kind of wanted to be back home in Lincoln. He transferred to the hometown university. Then things got real interesting when he was welcomed as a walk-on by the old staff. Good size, he's 6'4", 240 pounds. Good work ethic, So stick him at defensive end. See what happens. Hops felt fortunate for the chance. He also felt a bit out of place. He hadn't played on defense since high school. He talked to a few buddies. I need to switch to tight end. When the new staff was hired, Hops decided to seek out grad assistant Tavita Thompson right away. Thompson would be coaching tight ends. When Hops told the coach his interest in switching to the offensive side of the ball, there was no resistance. Took me in right away, Hops said. Asked me why I wanted to be a tight end. I told him. That doesn't mean last year was easy, a rough spring, the playbook still in Greek. Slowly but surely, though, Hops started to hit his stride. In the fall, he was on the scout team working against starters such as Greg McMullen and Jack Gangwish. That's humbling, but there were also those moments when he realized, hey, I can play with all these guys. It felt even better this spring. Learning the playbook is a real big key when playing confident, he said. That's what I found is once you learn the playbook, you can do whatever. Husker coach Mike Riley, in fact, even mentioned the junior unsolicited as a walk-on whom coaches were giving a good look. Then offensive coordinator Danny Langsdorf brought him up as a guy who was positioning himself to be next in line after the trio of seniors, Keith and Carter, Sam Cotton, and Trey Foster. Family members were quick to spot a few articles that mentioned his name. His aunt and sister saw them before he did, posted them on Facebook. Friends and family were chiming in. Great job, keep it up, you can do this. Hops takes it in stride. No inflated ego here, but you can tell he's having fun. Now, the push is on to be more than just a feel-good spring story. He's the first to tell you he's got to keep getting better at his blocking. But if he can do that, who knows? Carter, Cotton, and Foster will all be gone after this season. For a position that's so important to this Riley Langsdorf offense, the development of a junior like Hops could be important the next couple of years as younger players, such as Matt Snyder and receiver signees Jack Stoll and Dave Englehart, build up for their opportunities. It was a dream come true running out of that tunnel for a game the first time, Hops said, but it'd be even better getting out on the field. He knows the walk-on success stories plenty well, chapters and chapters of those stories. Stories like Gangwish, who didn't play it down for 3 years and suddenly played in 12 games as a defensive end as a junior and earned a black shirt as a senior. Hops hears his name and smiles. That's exactly the type of guy I'd like to be, he said. He's a hard worker. He wasn't a big star coming out of high school, but he worked his way up. That's really what pushes these Nebraska kids when they get on the team.
From track and field, Omaha World Herald. Well armed for all seasons, Arlington Senior throws her hat in the ring as state title contender. With a penguin stocking cap on her head and softball on her mind, Arlington Senior Sabrina Luttig has developed into one of the best discus throwers in the state. Yes, she's thinking about softball as she fights each meet to surpass the 160-foot mark. Specifically, she imagines herself crouched behind home plate where she plays catcher. It's something for me in the heat of the storm. It's my calming point, Luttig said. So is the penguin hat, a gag present from her friend her freshman year. It's her good luck charm that she'll take off only when she's throwing in meets. Then it hangs close by. I'm a softball player, she said, so I've got superstitions. Luttig has loved softball since she first touched the ball, but she definitely has a talent in the throws too, as she's hit a school record and state-leading 159 feet in the discus and 38.9 in the shot. Her 159 is the best by a Nebraska girl in 12 years. The all-time record is 185.4. Schools like Missouri, Colorado, South Dakota, and Air Force had been interested since she was a sophomore, but she's going to Butler Community College in Kansas to play softball. She was delighted to learn this week that the school will allow her to keep throwing too, even though both sports are in the spring. A couple of infielders there already pull double duty. The busy schedule won't be anything new for Ludwig, whose life is already a dizzying blend of track, softball, family, and school. It started early in the summer with 6 a.m. lifting sessions with the football team. As soon as I'm done with track, I'm off to softball practice, she said. I'll finish throwing and I'll go drive to Kansas City to play in a softball tournament all weekend. She's famous for the comment, "one more thing." I mean, like 10. I won't leave until I've had the best throw for that practice, she said. It's really important for me to keep putting more time in each thing that I have. She freely admits she's a perfectionist. She has a 3.75 grade point average, and it drives her nuts to get a B. In softball, she broke school records with her .550 batting average last fall and her 19 career home runs. There's a drive that some athletes are born with, and Ludwig says she has it. She gets an assist from head coach Stephen Gubbles and throws coach Jake Eichhardt. She says they do a good job of breaking down each part of her throws. Plus, she has lots of athletic ability. You have got to have a good combination of strength and footwork, and just coordination in the ring is at the top of the list, Gubbles says. She has all the qualities. Ludwig has made it to state and finished in the top 10 every year, but she's never won a title. As a freshman, she said she was shocked to see the big crowds at Omaha Burke and think that everyone was watching. But now that she's a senior and has her college choice locked up, she says she can perform well without any stress in the background. I want by the end of the year to see how close I can get to the state record, if not beat it, she said. I want to take state for all classes. I want to have the top throw in all 4 classes. But even that may pale to a little competition she has going with fellow Arlington senior Nick Gaffney. The last couple of weeks, they've been battling to see who can hit 160 first. Although she's ahead of his 154.8 best in the discus, he bested her last week. We push each other really hard, Ludwig said. It's all fun and games. It's all about helping each other out. And it's close to the 8 o'clock hour, so back to Emily Masters, our announcer and technician.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of your live streaming for this evening. Since it is at 8 o'clock mark.
Talking about Kirby, we live quite close to each other. I live at 114th and just north of Center, and he lives at 105th, just south of Center.
Oh, okay.
So once before we met at the Rockbrook Cafe, so that could happen again.
Yeah, well, I hope you do. Just get a close feel. Of course, he was in the control room when I first started.
Right.
And he always treated me so nicely.
Yeah.
And I just admire him.
Yeah.
Well, great. Say hi to him for me if you can.
I will do so. Okay.
Well, I'm going to think of it.
Would it work to invite you?
Well, yeah, it would. Yeah.
You're free most anytime?
I am, yes.
Is your office downtown? Or?
My office is downtown, but I of course, can go anywhere.
Yeah, so that...
See if I've got my card.
Coming up next on your radio.
Yeah, let me give you my card. I think it's got my cell phone on it.
Get ready to be chilled and thrilled. Your CBS Radio Mystery Theater.
Yeah, let me write my cell phone.
So we should meet at a place halfway.
Oh, no, I'd be happy to come out wherever you select. I could go out to Rockbrook very easily.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or that South Omaha hamburger place.
Oh, yeah, on Benton Street.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite places.
Kirby's not one to linger, even though he's retired. He doesn't make it a long lunch hour or anything like that.
Oh, okay.
It's eat and go, so gotta talk fast. Okay, we'll include you in.
Hey, that'd be terrific.
Yeah.
Hey, have a nice week.
Okay, same to you. And when do you go to Iowa for your?
Yeah, I'm embarrassed to tell you,